Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast, where our goal is simple: to learn from the best and discover how we can all live a better life, build a more fruitful business, and be more productive. Join us each week as we interview fellow entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and leading experts to discuss everything from marketing secrets to new technology and life as an entrepreneur.
Hello, boys and girls. Today's episode is an interview that Jay Abraham did on me this past spring during the peak of coronavirus. And the title of the interview we called Lockdown Lessons. And we cover the things that you need to know in order to adapt in this crazy environment. Jay's been a client, a friend, and a mentor for years. So it's always so interesting talking to such a genius when it comes to business strategy and marketing. We go over what you need to do to adapt in this crazy environment. How do you maximize opportunities and optimize your business so that you not just survive, but thrive in this new paradigm? And how to get leverage, no pun intended. If you like this episode, as always, we would really appreciate you giving us a rating and sharing with your friends. Thanks, and hope you enjoy.
We're with a very good friend of ours, somebody who he's ahead of his time because he's been on the forefront of all kinds of high performance operational leverage. His company is called Leverage. He serves thousands of companies all over by providing skill set, expertise, resources that extend dramatically their capability without them having to have these people reside at their businesses. And today, they couldn't reside at their businesses if they wanted to, unless, of course, they were an essential business. But we're going to do a special probative interview with Nick Sonnenberg. And it's also when your business moves away from you. And, nobody here that's watching, with few exceptions, you might have an office, you might have a practice, you might have a clinic, you might have a retail store, you might have a warehouse, you might have anything. But guess what? Unless you're operating under the shroud of confusion, you're supposed to be home, as are all your people, and maybe half of your people are no longer on your payroll. And it's a problem now, but I can promise you it's going to be a far more multiplied problem when we get back into reality. And because of that, we are going to roll up our sleeves and probe the mind of somebody who is dealing on the front lines of what I'll call crazy capitalism, a world gone mad, where people's realities are changing, the way they're communicating is changing, the way they are managing is changing, the way they're interacting, the way they're operating is changing, the people they're using are changing, the service providers are changing. And most people, very honestly, aren't skilled, aren't good enough logical, critical, consequential thinkers to know how to maximize what's going on, but also how to optimize the opportunities and the new paradigms that this change is going to usher in. And we are going to get the ultimate master of how to leverage all things external and what to do, why to do, how to do it, and what people are doing, should be doing, could be doing, and where the opportunities will be the most plentiful. Nick Sonnenberg, hello, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Your intros are way, way better than my intros. I'm going to have to practice on mine.
I like to romance the implication that I see, and some of them are too long, but at least they acknowledge. And Nick's background is very interesting. He's a very brilliant guy, and his background, he was a very successful high-frequency trader for hedge funds, and he decided that bored him, even though he was one of the highest income generators for the fund, and he lived around the world, and he decided he wanted to do something more meaningful, more purposeful, more valuable, and more evolvingly relevant. And he saw the future in a way that most people didn't. Now, the future is us. So we're going to get into it. So, Nick, let's start with a summary of what reality looks like today in the middle of the lockdown for almost everybody versus what reality might have looked like 6 weeks ago.
Well, reality 6 weeks ago is people were physically co-located in an office, working together and kind of continuing business as usual. And now they've just been hit hard with this reality that now they have to be able to work remotely. And it's a totally different way of operating. It was the future of work anyways, but instead of having a 2 or 3 year runway to get set up, people got the carpet ripped out from underneath them. And now they're getting thrown in the deep end of the pool to figure out how do you actually work together remotely. And anyone could work remotely. I mean, you could have a phone and call people or go on Zoom and say that you're able to work remotely, but being efficient and remote is a totally different animal. Like anyone could say they're a marketer, but being at your level, or being a business strategist, but be at your level versus an intro person, there's a huge swing of the pendulum in terms of how prepared people can be. And I fear for people, because I think the worst is yet to come. In my mastermind group with my clients or my private clients or leveraged clients, the biggest risk I'm seeing is people haven't yet stress tested what happens when, it's not really if, it's when someone gets sick with this virus or a loved one gets sick or something bad happens and someone has to, it's one thing to be remote, but people haven't yet thought through the worst case scenario analysis of what do you do when a key team member is out for 2 weeks or indefinitely, God forbid, and they haven't stress tested yet who does payroll if that person can't come in for 2 weeks. So that's my biggest fear that I think is the next wave of kind of chaos that's about to happen here.
Well, and also I think you're going to find that in the beginning, people are, this is my assumption, you may disagree, people are struggling with cabin fever, but in the same light, they're sort of enjoying the fluidity and flexibility. They just don't like to be forced to stay in. They'd like to go out. But I think that they're going to have a great difficulty going back to status quo because now they have the flexibility. They can be very optimal. Good people can get more done on their own in less time than they do in a work environment. And I think it's going to play topsy-turvy with our historic management and operational structure, don't you?
Oh, totally. I wouldn't want to own one of those places like WeWork or Regis, because I think that a lot of people, to your point, they're going to come out of this and realize, hey, I don't have to commute an hour to work each way and sit in traffic. And I can sit in my most comfortable pajamas, but wear a nice shirt on top. And no one knows the difference, or
nobody cares.
No one cares. Now I can go to the Caribbean for a month and work from a beach. And as long as my work gets done and I have an internet connection, that's all that matters. I tell a story of Andrew Parks on my team. He was 2 years ago or a year ago, I can't remember, but he was at a nice job making 6 figures, and he was full-time at a large company in Toronto, and he would have to sit in traffic an hour a day each way. So he has a wife and kids, and 2 hours out of his day was stuck in traffic. He was sick of the cold in Toronto, and we worked out a deal to pay him, in line with what he was making, but he could work from anywhere. So financially, he was kind of neutral, but quality of life wise, he went up exponentially. He has a walking treadmill. He walks 7 miles a day. This last February, 2 months ago, he went to Mexico for the month with his whole family. And he's spending more time with his kids. He doesn't sit in traffic. So there's so many benefits to this. And it would be a shame if people came out of this without fixing their, what I like to call operational debt, and getting themselves set up for this, because it's the best time. Usually the most change happens when you're forced, when in situations like this.
It's cathartic.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of benefits that will come out of this if people use their time wisely.
So I'm going to ask you some questions that I'd like to hope nobody else has ever asked you, and I think your answers will be quite profound. So there's a good, bad, good.
Yeah.
So there are very few people I know who have retained 100% of the team they had in January now. It's a sadness, but some of the people that have been purged or eliminated or temporarily eliminated were redundant. Some of them were low skilled and they were support, and they were not as relevant when volume dropped. Some of them were very, very, very high skilled, and they were removed for one of three reasons. Either they earned too much, and very frankly, the company, if it was not a huge one, needed to bear that big of an overhead, or that person's skill could not be really executed and applied in the stoppage or the slowdown of what happened. But the point is, now you've got these businesses, and I'm talking mostly entrepreneurial, but certainly corporate, and you've got all your people working virtual. You have people that are no longer working for you, who on the high end of the skill set probably possessed an enormous amount of the knowledge base and the skill set, both in what was possessed here and the ability to share, guide, manage, direct. So now I've got a business, and my business wasn't set up to be virtual. So now I got all the people that are still with me operating from home, and maybe we have the right technology, maybe we don't, maybe we have the right activities or responsibilities, maybe we don't, maybe we have the right monitoring and measuring and management of not just what they're doing, but that they're doing it, maybe we don't. We've got huge chunks of people who now were valuable to us that are no longer with us, who may never come back, or may even be so angry at us, they may go, because I teach it, I use their relationships and skills somewhere else against us. We've got cash flow that's probably, unless we're a unique entity, dropped, capital dropped. We may resume in May or June when it comes back to some sense of reality with a much more pared down or different business. We're in the process concurrently, I'm giving you a headache, concurrently of contemplating, do we stay in this business? Do we pivot? Do we add other businesses? Do we figure different things to do with our profile buyer and our decision maker? How do we retrain or repurpose certain people to optimize their ability to add value and be more productive from a distance than maybe even they were from down the hall? And those are just a few of the things that seem to me to be just profoundly evident that have to be dealt with. And you may not agree, and you may have different ones, but why don't you hit on some of that?
All right. Well, you were right. No one's ever asked me that before. So that was a good one.
Good question.
I always love a good Jake. Actually, before you joined, I wasn't sure if I was interviewing you or you were interviewing me. So I was saying, Brian, you listened to all of Jay's podcasts. What's a question that's burning inside of you that you're surprised no one has asked Jay? So it was just funny that you threw that at me.
Everyone's asking you the same question. I want to ask questions that will stimulate perspective you haven't thought about, and maybe give you some other opportunities.
Well, totally. What I was just saying to Brian is, when you just get asked the same questions over and over, it's not stimulating for the other person. So that's one thing that I try to always do too. A couple of things. One, I think that on a positive, there's never been a better time. If you're in a position to hire people, the amount of available talent now is just amazing. Luckily, at Leverage, we haven't laid anyone off. Actually, we just hired 2 extremely talented senior people this month. So I think that this is a market for employers. If you are in a financial situation, there's a ton of really, really great talent that normally is not on the market that now is on the market. The second point to make is employee turnover, I feel, is one of the most expensive things in a company. And if you actually look at a graph of the last 10 years of the average retention of an employee, it's exponentially been decreasing. And if you look back even further, I mean, if you look back far enough, maybe 10 or 20 years, it was something like 10 years on average, and now it's like less than 3. So what does that mean for a company? Well, it means that all the information, if you don't have good systems and process, this is why I get obsessed with this stuff. I hate the feeling of loss or being suboptimal. So when you hire someone and it takes, say, 3 or 6 months or however long to get them up to speed, and they only stay for, say, less than 3 years, a significant amount of money that you invested is just put to waste because it, say 25% of the 20 or 25% of the time of the amount of money that you spent is in training, and then you lose them. And then if you compound that with poor systems where they leave and you were only text messaging with them, so that whole history of conversation basically just dies. The next person that you hire, they don't have access to your text messages, or they have all this knowledge in their head and you didn't have a knowledge base to document how they did things or what their ideas were. It all dies with them. It's kind of like in chess. If you move a piece, say 10 times, but then that piece gets captured, those 10 moves die with that piece dying, is the way that I look at it. Actually, I have right here, I think I told you about this book. So I'm a chess player. And this book, I think you would really like, just for the purpose of the titles of the chapters. I know I'm getting a little distracted, but I like how we have ADD with things.
I want to hear your answers.
Plan with pencil, play with pen. The exponential problem. This book has, I'll send you a picture of some of these titles of the chapters, but there's some pretty cool marketing related concepts. So I look at an employee like a chess piece. And when you lose that person, if you haven't documented and captured knowledge in a smart way to easily transfer that knowledge to someone else, it's like you really are losing the 10 moves you moved with that piece. You lose all 10 moves. But if you've documented the processes and captured the knowledge, maybe you only lose 1 out of the 10 and you've minimized it. So I think that documentation's key. I think now's a great time to hire people. What was the other part of the question?
It's a different reality now. You're going to have to make people who are not used to doing something, you're going to have to compensate for skilled people that are gone, that maybe you can find more, but maybe your budget now is not able to afford that now.
I think you have to be creative with your comp structures, right? Like, how can you move people from more salary to performance based, align incentives as much as you can with company performance, which is always a tricky thing for a business owner, but it's something that, regardless of Corona, we're always trying to do. And it's easier said than done, of course, but how do you create a comp structure so that everyone's winning and there's no risk, or you've minimized the risk of losing? So aside from comp models, though, I think that people have to reevaluate role and responsibility. Your business is probably changing, and probably with that, role and responsibility is changing. So, if the person was a person at the front desk to greet people, well, that's not a position anymore. So maybe there's something else that person's skill set could add value.
I think that the key to me, having people outside of my visual range means that I have to, first of all, have a perception of seeing them at home. I have to have a clarity of what the highest and best use of whatever they're doing is, and the priorities, because, we have to have imperatives. And I think it's different because I think my take is, and you're the expert, you divide and conquer. Everything doesn't have the same relative weight and just relevance that it might in a normal work environment. To me, you have to basically divide and conquer. There's certain things that are more critical. There's certain things that are deserve more time allocation. There's certain things that can be deferred. I think you have to look at it from a different paradigm and a different mental template than you would normally, but you may not.
Well, I think what this whole thing is going to do is make people realize that they were managing people wrong the whole time. So the systems that I teach, one of the core components, so I have a framework called CPR. It stands for communicate, plan, and resource. And that's what we use at Leverage as an operational foundation. And that's what I do in my mastermind and consulting. That's the framework. And the P part is planning. And a lot of people brute force through that process, and they don't have any kind of system or project management software to know who's working on what. At a high level, the purpose of a tool like that is so that as an individual, what is the most important thing I should be working on right now? And as a business owner, so that hey, what's getting done this week? And you could all be on the same page, and you're not forced to be in person. One thing that's going to happen is people are going to realize how important having that system of accountability is. And another thing that's going to be, I feel another thing people will come out of this is, rather than managing people by tracking their time, it's going to be much more of a results-based than time-based mentality in companies, which should be the case anyways, but it wasn't for most companies. And I think that this is going to because now you can't see what time people clocked in or clocked out. And in a perfect world, it shouldn't matter. In a perfect world, everyone should know what their goals are, what they're held accountable for. You should have a system of accountability. And at the end of the day, you shouldn't care, is someone in Mexico this week, or are they in New York, or did they start work at 10 o'clock, or did they take the day off? At the end of the day, as long as the results are getting done, that's all that should matter. And when you're remote, you're forced to work like that, which is the better way of working, I feel.
I think it's good. So you have always, before this happened, advocated that you could double, redouble again your impact, your productivity, your effectiveness, efficiency by using whatever you want to call your resource team. And you've proven it to many companies for whom you've turned a little bit of extra investment into a lot more output or outcome or income. I think you should talk a little bit about that strategy and some of the implications. And I'm going to temporarily, because I'm going to get some more water, remove myself while you talk, but I don't want to talk. I'll just be a gaping hole. I'll move myself.
All right. I'll talk to your basketball.
About there, interview me for a minute, okay? An answer. I'll be back.
All right. So one thing right now, so Leverage, my company, we're this on-demand growth agency where we give companies this agile team of marketing, sales, operations experts that could do anything from content creation, create a blog, create an article, do a landing page, create lead magnets, to a certain degree, implement some of the systems that I teach, which we're rolling out. Now, that's helpful for a lot of people in this environment because if you are cost conscious and you can't keep a full-time salaried person during this, we're a good alternative because for, month to month at a low minimum monthly, you could still have some minimum presence when it comes to your growth investment. At least in my experience working with, so many different entrepreneurs through Leverage and the private consulting, I think there's two concepts that people think about. And one is return on investment, but one shift with return on investment that I think people don't consider enough is the time horizon that it takes to get a return on that investment. So still, it's return on investment where you're gauging the impact of that by some dollar amount increase. But I think that right now in these environments, the time horizon to get that return is critical. Another thing, I, as far as I know, I created this concept, but I talk about not just return on investment, but return on time, which was a big underpinning concept with why we built Leverage the way we built it. So what I mean by return on time is how can you get maximum leverage and say it takes you a minute of your effort to say delegate or explain something and the output is an hour or 10 hours. So I think not just return on investment, but return on investment with time horizon factored in, but return on time. So I'll give you an example. I'm a writer for Inc. and I'm not a good writer. So what I'll do is I'll take low productive time, like if I'm in the back of an Uber, and I'll do a 1 minute audio recording. So it was time that was basically worthless anyways. And I'll audio record some content, and then I'll send that to my ghostwriter at Leverage, who will listen to it and write an Inc. article and then promote the Inc. article across all the social media. So 1 minute of low productive time turns into something that, maybe sometimes it's 3 minutes if we want to be honest. But the output is something like 5 to 6 hours of work. So I would say one thing that people need to think about is time horizon for return on investment and think about return on time.
And I think there's another one, and it's really return on the opportunity. And the opportunity is many things. It's not just a positive opportunity. It's the opportunity to do lots of things. I think there's many different denominators that you can RO. Instead of ROI, you can RO all kinds of different letters.
Maybe that's a new concept for you, ROX. And then it's like you could just...
We actually created one time 100 ROs, return on effort, return on return on brand, return on.
But it's totally,
all kinds of things.
It's
and
totally
nobody
right.
Looks at that.
No, everyone just thinks about investment, and there's so many other things you could get a return on. I have a question for you, Jay. I know you're interviewing me, but I have one question for you.
Ahead.
You have been consulting and a high-level strategist for such high-level people from Damon John and Tony Robbins and many other people, and you've been in this space for decades and you've seen so many different things. Is there any parallel in your experience that this coronavirus is remotely reminding you of or similar to since you've started your business career?
Actually, yes. So let's break it into two parts. The universal, meaning things that are reminiscent, and the unique, all right? Downward economy, downward where things slowed down is common. I've seen that 4 times. People having their economic security and income and cash flow diminish or disappear, common. Businesses dropping, common. Let me go the other side. I'm not going to complete. Commerce continue is common. Commerce stopping at a standstill, unique. Everybody having their income, with little exception, not just dramatically reduced, but eliminated, unique. Unemployment being so significant and representing so much skill and non-skill, that's very unique. I mean, you look at both of these things, business models needing to change radically, that's unique because most people just were able to find ways to sustain or cut down, but they kept in their regular business model. I think the resets, the pivots, the expanded product service offerings, the consolidations that are going to happen. Advertising being very, very soft is historic, but I think right now, more so, people being forced to be more focused because they're all stuck at home is unique. Deal making being, I mean, right now, if you wish to buy a car, or I would suspect even a house, or anything that is being affected by this, it's a buyer's market, I would think. Stock market is a little bit, different than that. Cash being very valuable, more so than normal. I sort of look at them 2 ways.
It's just interesting, right? It's not just the magnitude. What makes this so interesting is how quickly people, it's not that you had 6 months to prepare for this. It was really just an immediate. So like when I'm thinking of impact to business, I'm thinking like in the 90s when internet came out, that must have drastically changed how business is run, but that was a slow rollout.
It was a slower embrace.
Yeah, it was a slow rollout. I'm just wondering if you've experienced or heard of or in history
nothing like this. I mean, there has never been anything this paralytic, if that's the right word, and this all encompassing and this complete stoppage of 80% of commerce. I mean, it always dropped down, but it still had commerce. You still had, you can go to a restaurant, wouldn't be as much people there. You could go to, to the movies, wouldn't be as many people there. You could go to a high-end store, wouldn't be as many people, and they wouldn't be buying as much. You could go on a little vacation, and maybe you wouldn't spend as much. But there's never been in my life a time where you were so mandated and constrained to your residence, and where beside the profound amount of people that are afraid of going out, you've got people sitting here worrying and wondering whether even under the protective shroud of a mask and gloves and hand sanitizers and spraying their house and not letting anyone in, they're still going to get it.
Yeah.
And then you got I don't think people can reconcile in our lives in this country, 30,000 people died in a month, and their bodies are stacked up in refrigerators. I'm trying to not be rude, but and you have to realize what is not recognized now, and we're getting into some murky areas, is with very few exceptions that are going to run counterintuitive, but they're going to benefit from this. There is almost nobody who has any money. You understand that? the restaurants, most of them ran out of money right away. The poor workers, people think, well, they live month to month or paycheck to paycheck, but in environments where they're paid tips, they live day to day. They live day to day. They get cash every day. It's profound.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. I think the big positive is if you can cultivate the ability to transcend not just the constraints, but the miasma that's holding people just into a surreal environment and say, okay, I have to figure how to be viable if I'm an entrepreneur right now. And I have to figure out how to stay viable once this in any way stops, because the world is different, doing business is different, buying patterns are different. There's a really interesting, and I have it here, there's a man that did a very sophisticated research document on the motivations of the market today and what are going to be necessary to really be able to represent. And it went from the kind of things you'd imagine, prestige and materialism, and now it's trust, security, confidence. It's 3 or 4 things that are totally different. They've always been subtle, but they're the driving motivators people are looking for. And those are going to overlay on a lot of stuff, because I don't care if you sell stuff for 80% off. If it's not what people are resonating to, if it doesn't fulfill or fill the void of either need or desire or requirements, I don't think it'll matter what you sell. I don't think it'll matter if you pay them.
Me and you did a very interesting podcast with Linda Kreitzman from Berkeley. You guys connected since, right?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, she's an amazing person. She's super smart, like PhD economics at an early age. So we were talking about the difference between how this is an economic crisis versus a financial crisis and the impacts of that. But if you
Why
look,
don't you describe the two so people understand?
well, I'm not an economist. I'm a financial engineer, but basically it's way worse is the punchline to it. What I can say about it is if you look at 2008 and you look at what caused or some of the initial impacts, it was a demand side impact. Consumers weren't spending money. This is a supply side shock to the economy. So it's a totally different shock to the economy than what we experienced before. And it can be far, far worse. You know, and then the amount of money that's being poured into the economy with these stimulus packages is just insane to think how much money. It's probably not even close to being enough.
No, I don't think it is. But what also people don't understand, and I'm not a good enough economist to be able to say this with intelligence, but anytime that amount of aggregate borrowing occurs, somebody has to pay it back. And they have to pay it back not at par, but with interest. Oh. So, I mean, there is a time of reckoning, and that's going to be quite profound too, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to come out of taxpayers' dollars. So the trickle effects of this is going to be interesting. You know, this is why I don't trade stocks anymore. I mean, I used to do it all mathematically based, and that was fine. But I don't trade for myself, because when you see how unemployment's spiking, trillions of dollars being poured in, and you have to think, man, it doesn't look like it's going that well. And then like the last week or two, it's flat or up. I mean, it went down sharply, but the fact that with continued bad news and poor earnings, poor unemployment, the market's still not going down, it makes you think, what the hell is going on here? Yeah,
I mean, you got to decide, what in the world does somebody know, if they really do know that we don't, or are they doing it purposely, or are they a bunch of deluded optimists who want to believe in surreality? But it's very interesting. Well, let's stay on point, because I want to bring this to the reason I wanted to interview you. So right now, give me 5 or 3 or 7 or 10 distinctions that you recommend everybody who is already been forced to have their business virtual, working from home, should really be mindful of. And then give me 2 or 3 more that'll be even more valuable and beneficial, maybe very profitable when we come back, if you can.
Sure. So I would say the most urgent thing right now, something that I always talk about in my framework, is documenting your company's knowledge, digitizing the knowledge. And now more than ever, that's important. And it doesn't have to be with fancy technology or tools. I have tools I could recommend: Process Street for documenting process, Confluence or Notion for documenting static knowledge. The way I explain that is knowledge falls into a bunch of different buckets. You have who, what, when, where, why. That's all static. That would be a wiki. And then you have process, which is how. So how do you do payroll? How do you onboard a team member? So you don't have to get caught up with the technology right now if you're really in crisis mode, but open up your computer, go to Zoom by yourself, record your screen doing the process. And it doesn't have to be anything more complex than that, but just have a record of how that's done. That's step one that I would just do right now. Because like I said earlier, I think people are sitting on massive risk in their company. The second thing to do after you do that is stress test it and be proactive rather than reactive in this environment as much as you can. So what I mean by that is don't wait for someone to get sick. Do a role rotation now and have someone watch that video, or if you are using a tool and doing it properly, however you want, but stress test it doesn't have to be every process, right? Some are more critical than others. If my podcast doesn't go live, no one's going to die. But if payroll doesn't get paid, there's going to be some issues with that. So identify the core ones and do a role rotation. At Leverage, every quarter we do a role rotation. And part of our quarterly planning is we pick one or two of the most important processes and we role rotate for the quarter. And that's one of our quarterly goals. So it's not always about revenue maximization. It's also risk mitigation. And I think that that's something that most people aren't thinking about. Everyone's just so focused on revenue generation. But the way I look at growing a company, you could do it in two ways. You can move forward faster, or you can avoid moving backwards. And most people are only focused on moving forward faster. They don't think about the moving backwards part. And until something like this happens, where something out of left field comes and you weren't prepared for it, think about risk mitigation and how you could do that in any capacity. So that's one thing. I think that this virtual stuff, if you can do it right, it's way better than in person, way more efficient. You could hire talent from all over the world. You can have happier employees with more flexibility. You instill a culture of results-based versus time-based mentality. Efficiency can be exponentially higher. It takes time to do. I mean, I've been living since, for the last 5 years that we've known each other, I've been living and breathing this stuff. And I've probably doubled my productivity in the last year because I'm constantly looking at this from a micro lens, trying to find smarter, better ways of having my team be more productive. So it's a never ending journey, but you should always just be trying to identify. I think the mindset, the right mindset to have is that you're always suboptimal and you're not doing anything perfect. And there's always a better way of doing something, and having that mentality.
That's great. So I'm going to interrupt now. So I'm going to bring it to a conclusion with a couple of questions. So categorically, what are the kinds, because I want people to be able to explore what you do, because we use you and we really respect you, and we have no economic gain in trying to encourage people to examine your services. But what are the different categories and functionalities? Because you've got some really fascinating services or providing activities that you render. What are some of them, and what are either the categories or some of the specific applications?
So the main thing that we do is content creation, digital marketing for people. So producing podcasts, creating lead magnets, things like that, SEO. What we're getting into more and more, because this is really what I'm good at, and I've been really only focused with with my private clients or mastermind, but it's something that we're going to start rolling out over time now because people need this stuff, is setting up the systems and tools to be set up for remote work. So getting set up with a tool like Slack for internal communication, or Asana for project management, or helping you to automate and document your core processes. So this is stuff we're not going to be equipped in the short term to do the strategy. That's like really where my unique genius is. But in combination with me helping people create strategy, and then my team that are already, world-class experts at these tools, having them execute on that strategy is going to be the next iteration of what you see with Leverage.
And you do it in a way where they can pretty much acquire what they need and stop when they are done needing.
It's a small monthly commitment. We start at $800 a month of commitment. And we do offer annual packages too that come with its own bonuses, but you don't have to commit to $100K a year salary for someone. It's very agile. You can scale up and down as much as you like, and you can go month to month. So it's a new way. It's a new way to get work done, and especially in an environment like this where you might not want to make huge financial commitments, but you still want to get access to high quality talent. We might be an interesting option to consider.
Yeah, well, also, I think a lot of people have lost or are going to lose key people. They may not, for two reasons. They may not want or be able to afford to replace them or retain them, but they also may not now see that they don't need the fullest utilization because there's an 80-20 or a 20-80 that those people have been doing that alone is more valuable than the rest of the effort and the activity they render. So that can be offset to somebody like you. It'd be very efficient, very effective, very, very ultra productive, don't you think?
100%. And actually, depending on when people listen to this, we, as of now, we'll probably lift it shortly, but we put a wait list on because we got flooded with stuff, and we're a marketplace. We have to manage supply and demand. So it's not this, if you're listening to this right now and you are looking for more work, we are hiring too. So we might be a good option, not just for people that need work done for their business, but even if you are a talented specialist, feel free to reach out because we're always looking to hire good people. And
he's got a very stimulating and a very, I think, enjoyable environment where people are not just working and getting paid. They're feeling like they're part of a mission. They're connected to the companies that they impact and contribute to. So
I hope so.
If people want to reach you, what do they do?
Well, my email is nick@getleverage. The website is getleverage.com. I don't know how long I'll keep it up, but I've created a free Facebook group to help people talk about how do you get set up for remote work. So that was just something I did pro bono, just to help people. And the name of that Facebook group is called Making Remote Work Actually Work. And there's a URL, remote.getleverage.com will point you to it. So even this recording right now is going live right now to that Facebook group. So feel free to join.
That's great. All right. Well, Nick, you are a very impressive person, and you were always on the cutting edge, but now you are so far ahead. And I think anybody who is struggling, anybody who realizes that this is not really going to be temporary, it will redefine the way that their business operates. Anybody who wants more competitive advantage, anybody who wants to be able to add great capability and skill without adding a lot of fixed salary overhead and burden, you're somebody great to talk to. And it's getleverage.com. And he's one of the good guys. And I appreciate you, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast from getleverage.com. Please let us know what you think. Rate and subscribe on iTunes. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs scale their business. We have experts that can help set up marketing and sales funnels, your email marketing, podcasts, social media creation, paid media, and much more. Grow your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more. Visit getleverage.com.